Little shout out to my little sister for letting me use her room because mine is super ugly and hers is super cute. Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to be going over my history with disordered eating. The reason I want to share my story is because I myself am a food freedom and body image coach, and I help people who struggle with disordered eating and body dysmorphia and exercise addiction. So I want my clients and just other girls in general who are struggling with the same thing to hear someone else's story and hopefully gain some inspiration and feel less alone in what they're going through. The first thing I want to say is I don't hold grudges against anybody. I don't blame anybody for what happened to me. I do mention some people throughout the story, nobody by name, but a lot of my family members were involved throughout my journey, but I'm not here to point fingers. But I would be lying if I said that certain comments or ideas that were pushed on me didn't influence the path that I went down. So I'm just going to start from the very beginning. I grew up in a household where food was constantly monitored and labeled, and especially by my dad, because he really just wanted us to be healthy, and his way of doing that was demonizing certain foods and praising others and being hypercritical of everything we were eating all the time. So there was this health concern going on in the household, but on top of that, I was told from a very young age that I had to maintain a certain body type basically to find a good husband, to be a good wife, and to succeed in society. I actually do remember at one point being told that it would be selfish of me if I were to gain weight in a marriage. I also remember exercise being a vital part of my childhood, probably ever since I could move. I remember seeing my dad work out all the time, and he was very intense with it, and it never really bothered me. I never thought it was a bad thing. And then I remember he would take me on workouts with him, whether it was bike rides or whatever, any physical activity, and it was always kind of this torturous experience. I think he really wanted me to build some mental grit or something, but it really made me think that exercise was this torturous, unenjoyable activity that I had to do in order to be worthy of a person and not be labeled as lazy. So we would go on these bike rides, and I remember just biking, I'd be drenching sweat and gasping for air and muscles burning, and he would praise me for getting to that point. And if I wasn't breathing hard or I wasn't looking completely exhausted, I was told that I wasn't pushing hard enough. There were also a lot of fat phobic comments floating around my household. I remember going out in public, and if we saw fat people, my dad would moo at them, call them cows, and just make grossed out faces. I mean, it was really, really intense, and I remember it making me extremely uncomfortable because something about that did not feel right to me. I didn't want to be making fun of any people. It really just made me feel sad, but it was also normalized in my head where even though it made me feel weird, I looked up to my parents. I looked up to my dad, and I was like, okay, well, if he thinks this, then I guess I should too. And I started to take on this idea that I can't be fat because this is how my dad's gonna think of me. He's gonna be disgusted by me, and think I'm lazy and unworthy. So I definitely started to see people in bigger bodies as less valuable. So as you can see, I had this foundation laid out for me from a very young age of fat phobia, exercise being torturous and necessary, and then, having these rules around food, or at least these moral ideas around food. But the real true darkness of my relationship with food didn't enter my life until high school. Around middle school, running became my passion in life. I remember it was the first time I felt like I had actually excelled at something. It was my identity, it was my stress relief, and I just fell in love with it immediately. I was really prone to injury when I was running, and there was an injury that I had in high school. I believe it was my sophomore year. And this time it lasted months. Like, I had injuries here and there all the time, but this one had lasted a very long time. And, you know, because of that, I couldn't run anymore. I had to take a few months off of just basically no exercise at all. And during that time, I remember seeing my body change drastically for the first time. And it was really shocking, and it completely freaked me out. During that time, I remember just feeling really lost and confused and lonely, and I didn't know who I was because the one thing that made up my identity was suddenly gone. And, you know, again, my body was changing. And I was really scared that I was going to receive ridicule for that, especially after seeing how my dad thought about people in bigger bodies. So of course, at this time, I'm desperately looking for answers and desperately trying to figure out how I can reverse this change that has happened to my body, even though I wasn't able to run. So after a couple of months of being injured, I actually remember sitting in one of my classes. I won't say which one because I don't want to out the teacher, but I do remember she was talking about a diet she was on, and this was completely out of context. Like, I remember it literally had nothing to do with what we were talking about, but she started telling us how when in college she had gained all this weight, and then she went on the paleo diet, and all the weight, she said, melted off her body. And I remember at the time I was like, this is meant to be, you know? I was looking for that thing to change my body, that one solution to make me shrink myself, and this was it. And I remember just being like, oh, like, here it is. And you know, at the time I was feeling all of those dark feelings, and I had convinced myself, I truly believed, like, if I can just get my body back to what it was, everything in my life would be perfect. So of course, after she tells us about her diet, I'm super intrigued, and I remember staying after class to ask her about it, and she told me all the nitty-gritty details that she could, and I was hooked. I was immediately hooked. I was so excited. This was my answer. And I remember going home and immediately just Google searching like a mofo, just all the information I could possibly gather on the paleo diet. You know, and I'm finding these inspiring stories of people who had been in bigger bodies, and they all of a sudden like rapidly lost all of this weight, and it was a miracle, and they were healthier than ever, and blah 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 blah. I mean, there was a million of those stories, and of course you don't ever see the long-term impact of going on diets like this, but you know, at the time I had no idea about that. I was just reading these success stories, and I was like, oh my god, this could be me. So I started immediately. I remember that same day I actually downloaded MyFitnessPal. And I've always been like a type A, like very driven person. And I think a lot of that influence comes from my dad, but this was really easy for me to just completely latch onto because I liked the structure and I really liked rules, and I liked having something that I could set goals for and have something that I could possibly excel at and focus on. Regimented rules are kind of my second nature. You know, and of course it was even more infatuating for me at the time because I was so used to this very vigorous way of training for cross country and track that because I couldn't run anymore, this was my new replacement for that. It was my new focus, new thing I could train for, you know? So instead of obsessing about how fast I could run, I was instead obsessing about how few calories I could eat each day. And the diet became dangerous almost immediately, and I definitely took it to a very far extreme. But, you know, the weight did come off very rapidly, but with that came detrimental health effects. And I remember feeling fatigued all the time, irritable. I remember actually walking down the halls at school and, you know, I'd get up out of my chair and feel like I'm gonna pass out. And then I remember walking down the halls and having to like lean against the wall so that I wouldn't fall over because I was like half blacking out all the time. And then of course came the comments from other people. You know, I think most people meant well. So again, I don't blame anybody, but I remember getting comments about, oh, you know, you've lost so much weight, you look so much better, you look so much healthier, and that only fueled the fire. And I feel like I just need to say this right now for everybody watching. Please don't ever make any comments about anybody's body, because you don't know how or why somebody's body looks the way it does. And, you know, even if you're coming from a well-intentioned place and you're just trying to compliment somebody, you don't know how that person got the body that they do, and it also puts this focus on their body and makes people feel like that the way they look actually matters, when really it doesn't. It puts a lot of worth on our appearance. People are so much more than a body, and there are an infinite number of things you can compliment somebody on that has nothing to do with their appearance. So circling back to the story, during this time I was also becoming really socially distant and isolated. I remember I stopped hanging out with friends because I was terrified of food being around that I wasn't allowed to eat, and I was, you know, so hungry and craving certain foods all the time that I didn't trust myself to control my eating around those social events. And then I also remember during high school eating my lunches in the bathroom stall because my lunches were, you know, they were weird. They weren't normal. They were very skimpy and, you know, very regimented and lacked carbs of all kinds. And, you know, people would make comments about it and they'd be like, oh, that's a weird lunch. And no one really like made fun of me or was harsh about it. But I think deep down I knew it wasn't normal or okay for me to be doing that. And I didn't want anyone to know that I was going to such extremes to change my body. And it was really embarrassing. I didn't want people to know that I was struggling with disordered eating or body image. So I would eat my lunches in the bathroom stall in order to avoid people seeing what I was eating. Yeah, at the time, it definitely felt like it was a dirty little secret that I was trying to hide from everybody. I also remember feeling so deprived and having insane cravings all the time that I actually worked at a froyo shop and I would binge on everything there all the time. I remember I would just go into work and I could not help myself. All the things that I told myself I wasn't allowed to eat was right in front of my face for my entire shift, and I would just go crazy. And I remember feeling this intense guilt and shame every time, and it was really hard because I had convinced myself that I was just so out of control and something was wrong with me, and I really just was constantly feeling guilt and shame. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't realize that this was a direct cause of me depriving myself. My body was just trying to protect itself and say, hey, we need food, we need sugar, we need carbs, like please feed us, you know? So, and all of those things were right in front of me. So of course, my brain was just like, I don't care what you think, like we're going in. And it was my body just trying to protect itself. So finally my injury got better, and during this time, because I was so focused on running, the obsession with food did start to dwindle quite a bit, although I definitely still had like a clean eating mindset around food because I really cared so much about running. You know, at that point it was less about me trying to shrink my body and more about I really just want to make sure I'm the best runner ever. And I was misled to think that I had to eat cleanly in order to run fast. But during my running career, I still was very insecure about my body. It was tough because I was a distance runner, and you know, the typical distance runner body is very slender and lean, and I had wider hips and thicker thighs than a lot of the girls that I ran against, and it made me very insecure. And people would point it out to me all the time. You know, they'd be like, oh, like, you look like you should be a sprinter or whatever, you know, just pointing out that my body was not like the typical distance runner body. And of course, those kind of comments stick with you. So who knows how many times it was said, but it was said enough for me to remember. So from the time that I recovered from that original running injury, my relationship with food definitely leveled out, and I didn't feel obsessed with it. I didn't feel like it was controlling my life until once again, I got injured, and this time it was when I was in college. So this running injury was by far the worst I had ever had. It's actually still not completely diagnosed. I don't exactly know what it is, and I still have problems with it, but the fact was I had to take a lot of time off of running. I mean, it was upwards of pretty much 2 years straight of just no running, and of course my body completely changed because I was, you know, running several miles a week. I don't want to put a number out there just because I don't want to trigger anybody, but, you know, I'm training hard. I'm training for collegiate running and then all of a sudden stopping. So, you know, I lost muscular definition and my body gained a little bit of weight naturally. And this memory makes me really sad, but I actually remember going to the physical therapist, and when she asked me why it was so important for me to get better, I remember the first thing I said was like, I just feel like I look like a potato and all of my muscular definition is gone and I hate how my body has changed so much. And Then my second point was I also want to start competing again. And it just breaks my heart knowing that it really was the motivation of having a smaller body that was really driving me to like be good about my PT and really take care of this injury. And it's just sad because I genuinely have always loved running, but because of my issues around my body, it turned into this way to manipulate my appearance. So the injury never really got better, and after living in a dorm and then living in a house with 8 other people, I actually moved in with my boyfriend, and now it was just us living together. So things kind of started to slow down a bit. I was no longer working. It was the first time in years that I was just focusing on school, and all of a sudden I had a lot of free time. So with this newfound free time, I started thinking a lot more about my body and food than I had in the last couple of years. And this time my obsession with food and my body unfolded in a way that was more intense than I could have ever imagined. And basically, I remember looking in the mirror and deciding I was going to manipulate my body. I was going to try to shrink it. And I downloaded MyFitnessPal again and just went headfirst into the disordered eating path once again. So essentially at this point, my life became studying for school, counting calories, and exercising excessively. And it was horrible, to say the very least. I was cranky, depressed, low energy, irritable, always in a bad mood. I was always hungry. I wasn't really enjoying life at all anymore. Everything felt like work. Everything felt really difficult and extremely taxing. And it was becoming so constant and automatic that I really had convinced myself that this was just the person that I was gonna have to be for the rest of my life. I thought I was always just gonna be this like bitchy, low energy, irritable, depressed person forever. So this went on very extremely for about a year, and then I started getting these really strange heart palpitations. And I think deep down I knew it was from the way that I was treating my body, but I didn't want to acknowledge it, so I kind of just ignored it and told myself it was normal. But then it started happening so frequently that I had to start paying attention to it, because I couldn't go exercise without my heart like freaking out. And then I was having other health issues, like a lot of issues with my gut, which was definitely because of my undereating and restrictive diet. And I remember going to the doctor and I was telling her about my heart issues, and she asked me like how much I exercise and what kind of foods I eat, and very quickly noticed that I was a little obsessive, maybe more than a little, with the way that I was approaching eating and exercise. And she basically told me that if I don't stop exercising immediately, that I was gonna have to face some very serious health consequences. She essentially told me that if I kept doing this, I was gonna die. And of course, this was quite a shock, because I had been ignoring these signs for a really long time, and to have somebody bring them to light was intense. And what breaks my heart is I remember being scared by that, but being more scared about the fact that I was gonna have to stop exercising and I would once again gain weight. That's what I was more afraid of. So because I had such a good support system with my boyfriend, I told him what was going on, and he really, really pushed me to stop exercising. And I didn't completely stop exercising because I just, I was really deep into this place, and I was too scared to stop completely. I was very much attached to movement, and I did ease up a little bit. So I started exercising a little bit less, and things started to get a little bit better. So my heart stopped having the weird issues, but all the other health complications that I was experiencing were still there, including the irritability, depression, fatigue, and then also not being able to sleep at night was another big one. So basically my disordered behaviors continued, and the real wake-up call happened when I graduated college. And this was the point where I decided to hire a life coach. And originally it didn't have anything to do with food or body. I hired this person because I wanted to learn how to be more confident. I was so insecure, so ashamed of myself, and I just wanted that confidence. So pretty much immediately, once I started with this coach, we quickly discovered that I had a lot of issues around food, exercise, and my body. I remember on our very first call together, I completely broke down and started crying. I spilled the beans on as much as I could about my relationship with food, exercise, and my body. And through working with my life coach, it was very clear and inevitable that this was gonna be the part of my life that I needed to work on heavily. So that's exactly what I did. So during this time I worked with my coach, I did have a lot of revelations about life in general. The biggest one for me was realizing that a lot of things in life are just an illusion. The structure of society, the rules we place on relationships, the people that we think we are, that we should be, the things that we think matter, the idea of needing to have a career, needing to have money, needing to have a husband, needing to have kids in order to be successful. I realized that these were all just fabrications and all just opinions placed by people before us. And this is when I discovered diet culture and realized that the beauty ideal that I had been trying to achieve was just a standard set by somebody because of an opinion, and an ideal that was basically created and pushed in order to sell products to women. It was so clear to me how this perspective was not serving me in any way, shape, or form, and in fact it was distracting me from living my life the way I wanted to. I knew for a fact I did not want my worth to be based on my looks. I didn't want my precious time and energy and money spent on dieting and exercising. It became really clear to me that the people who cared about me in my life didn't care about how much I weighed, they care about the person that I was and the memories that I made with them. And that really kickstarted my recovery, and I never looked back. But I will say recovery was and still is really difficult. You know, I still have my own struggles, but it's a matter of having the tools to deal with those disordered thoughts that come into your brain. One of my great mentors, Kara, always says that recovery is not a straight line, it's a motherfucking scribble. But basically going through this process and realizing that so many women were struggling with the same thing that I was is what kickstarted my desire to want to become a coach. I knew that I needed to share what I had discovered with other women. And that's when I joined a training program and decided to become a food freedom and body image coach. And I freaking love this work. I am so passionate about helping other women break free from the same dark place that I got caught up in. So I know I kind of skipped over like what recovery actually looked like for me, but I do want to make a whole separate video about that because that in and of itself is a very in-depth topic. Really, essentially, my goal with this video is to share with you the struggles that I went through in order to show you that I was in that place and now I'm in a completely different place. I got out of that hole that I was convinced I would never, ever get out of. So if you're struggling with anything related to over-exercising, body image, disordered eating behaviors, dieting, just know that you're not alone and there absolutely is another way and you absolutely can get out of this dark place that you're in. And now my job is to show women how to do that. So in my next video, I plan on talking about what my recovery actually looked like. But if you're interested in starting a recovery and you're not really sure where to start, hit me up. You can follow me at Think Outside the Bod on Instagram. I hope this video was inspiring or helpful for somebody out there. I know it's really easy to feel alone in this process and feel like you're crazy or no one else is going through what you're going through or nobody else gets it, but I'm here to tell you, like, I get it, I relate to you, and you're not alone, and you absolutely can get out of this. There's another way to live that is so much more fulfilling. Well, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. I know it was a long one. I appreciate you watching, and if you have any other questions for me, feel free to DM me. Feel free to reach out if you're interested in coaching, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer any and all of them. All right, see you guys later.